Hello my friends, welcome to a little bit of a thought experiment that I've been mulling over recently and wanted to just make a little bit of a video about. The idea is, if a unit was taken from StarCraft 2, an exclusive unit from that game, and ported into StarCraft 1, how good would that unit actually be? So today we're going to do a tier list, and that tier list is exactly that, we're doing only ladder units because if I included campaign and co-op, there'd be like 700 different units and it would take 6 hours to make this video. So we're using only ladder units, and they're going to be transported to the best approximation that they possibly can be. So for example, we're going to start with the Marauder, and there is no tech lab on the barracks, but there is 100 minerals and 25 Vespene gas to supply. All that would be the same, does good damage against big targets. Those same basic ideas, but no tech lab, so it probably would need an academy instead. And I would think of it as a unit that requires an academy to be built out of the barracks. The other thing is that I'm going to be looking at it from two different perspectives. One, skirmish mode, and two, the campaigns. So if there's a little bit of just every single kind of game mode that you would play, because a lot of these units are extreme in very different ways. Anyway, we should begin with the Marauder. And the Marauder is a very interesting one. Obviously, it is an incredible StarCraft 2 unit. I would say it's a solid A tier in StarCraft 2. And one of the reasons for that is because infantry bioballs are fantastic. The amount of damage that they put out is insane, and they only have one real weakness, and that is area of effect damage. Marines get melted by AoE, but the Marauder, on the other hand, can actually soak a good decent bit of it and be okay. That's a huge advantage, and also it can take frontline punishment. However, I think that the Marauder is actually worse in StarCraft 1 than it would be in StarCraft 2. This is because A, the pathing is worse, which makes infantry worse. Infantry falls off in every matchup pretty quickly in StarCraft 1. The Marauder would still be okay against AoE, except for the fact that AoE in this game is horrifying compared to StarCraft 2. Psystorm does 112 damage. Plague does 300 damage. Siege tanks do infinity damage. In theory, the Marauder is better at tanking those AoEs, but in practice, not really, to the point that it doesn't have a huge benefit and it's still pretty expensive. So I think that it would always be a decent unit to have, but never exceptional. By the way, with all of these tiers, this is the same system that we pretty much consistently use, where the top tier is always incredible, and then every tier you go down, it's either that level of power but inconsistent, or one notch of power down, right? So incredible to great, great to decent, decent to subpar, and subpar to bad. And then we have the tier. This tier is for a special little selection of units, and the reason I bring it up right now is for the Reaper, which is going straight into the tier. Because I don't think the Reaper, numerically, would be giga overpowered in StarCraft 1. However, cliff jumping, as a whole, is so ridiculously unaccounted for in all of the game's design that it would instantly break everything and require the entire game to essentially be remade map-wise from scratch in order to compensate for this unit. And then I think statistically it would be completely fine, and it would not be a problem, but it would ruin the game in the process. And there is one other unit that applies to, and I'm just going to put this right in the tier, and that is the Stalker. Neither of these are statistically good combat units, but the fact that StarCraft 1 they did not have this in mind at all means it would be so abhorrently broken until it is fixed that they deserve their own tier. And it is the bottom and the top at the same time, because it is S+ if it's not addressed. Now, a unit that I think is actual legitimate S tier in StarCraft 1 would be the Widowmine. I do not know. I have been wrapping my head around the idea of how a mech Terran player that has a base that is covered in spider mines, with StarCraft 1 siege tanks behind, with Goliaths for anti-heavy anti-air, and then Widow Mines to take down the smaller anti-air and being able to do massive splash damage to people diving in. How would they ever die to anything ever? I don't think they would. I think that would be the bow on top of mech StarCraft in both the campaign and co-op that would make them essentially unbreakable. And it comes doubly well because detection in StarCraft 1 is far worse than StarCraft 2. Remember, Protoss only has the Observer, which dies in one hit to the splash damage of a Widow Mine. Like, that is insane. Imagine playing StarCraft 1 trying to micro your observers up into this line of death, and if you mess up even a slight bit, the splash damage kills your detection. Oh, it'd be awful. It would be so strong. A unit that I don't think would be necessarily as good is the Hellion and the Hellbat. I think that they would be C tier in always, or sometimes decent. The reason being is kind of like we were talking about with the Widow Mine. The Vulture with the Spider Mine is insane, and it does so much. And there's not a whole lot that the Hellion does that's necessarily better. The Hellion is really good against things that are stacked up, but that simply doesn't happen as much in StarCraft 1. So a lot of that equity is lost. Even stuff like Zerglings don't stack up particularly well in StarCraft 1. So the only thing they'd be great against is drones, but Vultures already turn drones into goo. They're very good at that already. The Vulture I just think is a better unit for cheaper. However, the Hellion does have the ability to become the Hellbat, which in theory could be useful sometimes. However, I'm not convinced that it would be better than the Vulture, partially because Hellbats just aren't even that good in StarCraft 2. They exist, they're okay, but they're never great, and Vultures are always great. So I'm not convinced. Another unit that I think would be a downgrade from their StarCraft 2 performance would be the Cyclone. And this is where we have to start talking about pathing. Oh, look, it lines up. I like that. Oh, almost. We have to talk about pathing. And that is the fact that the Cyclone has to lock onto a target and then start kiting back and forward and back and forward and back. That works great in StarCraft's engine that uses nav mesh and uses flocking algorithms. Absolutely incredible. But if you go back to the bare bones grid-based A-star that is StarCraft 1, suddenly your Cyclone is either running too far forward and getting blasted, or it is not able to sustain the lock, or just weird stuff happens all the time. It would be so frustrating to deal with all the time. I don't think it would be good. Additionally, it'd be way harder to get locks against a lot of stuff because you try to run into range and then Reaver Scarabs get you, or Siege Tanks blast you. There's a whole lot more things that kind of vaporize the Cyclone in that game. And then another unit that I think would be really bad is the Thor, because the Thor would get stuck on everything in StarCraft 1. I don't think a Thor could get down a ramp. Like, a Thor is a big Goliath, right? It's 3 Goliaths in a trench coat. Goliaths can't get up and down a ramp. What is a Thor going to do? This unit, it is a very big and powerful and heavy hitter that if you got it onto the field would probably be able to do some really cool things. You would never get it anywhere that you want it to be. It would be stuck inside of your base. Your opponent would be blasting you. You lose your expansion while it's trying to slow walk its way over there, and you could just have 3 Goliaths instead. So yeah, I think Thors are D tier, man. Banshees, on the other hand, baby. I considered putting the Banshee in S tier, I'm going to be completely honest, but I think that they are an A tier unit. One of the things that you learn very quickly in StarCraft is that the original game flyers are bad, and that is intentionally so, particularly the low tier flyers. And that is because they have really, really, really good and smooth movement, where all the ground units do not. Because they don't have to use collision, they don't have to use anything, it works perfectly all the time forever. And that means that the Banshee would be able to run circles around everybody else. It would be the Terran version of the Mutalisk that cloaks in a game with really bad detection, and the damage output is insane. And like, it 2 shots every worker, it would be a nightmare for everyone else in the world to deal with. It would be massable, it would be harassable, it would be just everything that has double S's in it, it would be able to do. Fantastic. Yeah, does a lot of damage. Raven, I think, is pretty good too. I'm going to say that Raven would probably be... Oh, it might be A tier, actually. Oh, it's pretty good. I was talking before about how the Marine is not a good scalable unit in the long term of StarCraft 1. Like, you get partway through a campaign or partway through the 1v1 match, and suddenly the splash damage starts coming out and the Marine starts being worse. Marines and Ravens, or Vultures and Ravens, seem like they'd be very good against both Protoss and against Terran, with the Interference Matrix being able to disable large numbers of powerful units. Because you can you can Interference Matrix a lot of scary stuff. Like Reavers inside of shuttles, or just Reavers in general, siege tanks who are sieged up. It'd be a lot like being able to throw down lockdowns, except the lockdown is on a flying unit. The Armor Shred missile, I'm not convinced would be that good, because things, once again, are very spaced out. And yeah, I don't know about that, but I think that the Raven would be a very powerful tool that also would be more mobile detection. It doesn't really overlap with the Science Vessel that much, which I think is one of the best things about it, is you get a lot of bang for that tech tree then. And that's already an incredible tech tree, one of the best. The Liberator is an interesting one, because the Liberator is pretty good in StarCraft 2, but I actually think that it's a little bit worse in StarCraft 1. Now, the Valkyrie is a unit that already exists in StarCraft 1, and the Liberator is just a worse Valkyrie. It doesn't do as much area damage, it doesn't hit that hard, it's fast, but so is the Valk, and it doesn't have nearly as much durability. But of course it does have the ability to siege up into a giant gun, but siege tanks are way less expensive in StarCraft 1, and they're better. So it's overlapping with another ability that isn't exceptional. However, I think that it would always be decent simply because it can do multiple things. I think that both of its abilities would be maybe C tier, or UG tier, actually. Actually, now I have to remember that skirmish mode exists, and in skirmish mode, flying one of these over the opponent's mineral line means that every single mineral line for the entire rest of the history of StarCraft would have to be designed with these in mind. So I guess they go into UG tier, because that would actually be abysmal. However, outside of that, I think they'd probably be somewhere in B. The Viking, I think, would be B just because it's reasonable and reliable and decent. Terran has a little bit of a problem with anti-air against large numbers of massed big flyers. For example, a lot of carriers or a lot of battlecruisers, that sort of a thing. You kind of have to like try to get cloaked wraiths into the area and hope that that works, or, you know, catch them out of position with Goliaths. The Viking would not solve that problem on its own. However, they would be able to supplement the already existing Terran composition in order to push enemies out of like dead zones and stuff like that. Additionally, they do have the ability to land, which I guess that means that they're safe against like Scourge and stuff sometimes. I don't know. I don't think the landing would be that good, but it is something. Now, the Battlecruiser is the next unit that I picked, and you might be like, wait, Grant, Battlecruiser's in StarCraft 1. And I wanted to just talk about it a bit because it's a very different unit. I think that it's A tier because the ability to teleport across the map is insane, and the machine gun damage that this does is crazy, crazy, crazy. I think it would be next to impossible to beat for a lot of people, except for maybe it has one weakness compared to the normal Battlecruiser. And that is, it actually loses the ability to one-shot Scourge. I think that you need +2 sky attacks with a Battlecruiser in StarCraft 1, and then you will always one-shot a Scourge, which makes them these juggernaut behemoths against Zerg in the late game. However, losing that ability actually would make them worse against Zerg, which is interesting. But of course, the ability to teleport across the map is insane, and we can see it with Recall in StarCraft 1 with the Arbiter. It's really good. Okay. So if you don't think the Queen is going into S tier, you are a fool. The Queen is, it would, in StarCraft 1, if you're on 3 base, you need 5 hatcheries. In StarCraft 2, if you're on 3 base, you need 3 hatcheries and a couple queens. The queens not only basically double your larva production, but they also provide at-home defense, and they provide a really nice heal, and they provide creep tumors which give vision. Creep doesn't do anything in StarCraft 1, but it would still be good for the vision. You would still spread creep. Like, this unit would completely... It would springboard Zerg into the game so fast that every mission in the campaign you played would be like 5 minutes shorter. And then every, you would just Zergling Rush. You could Zergling Rush every single game, and it'd be unstoppable on one hatch in StarCraft 1, basically, in Skirmish. Ridiculous. The Baneling, I think, is actually probably like B tier. It'd be really good for, like, in Skirmish mode, busting your opponent's walls really quickly. You'd have to be built to survive against that, but the fact that you can't bring like 50 Banelings into a fight, which is kind of what you need to do to get them to connect in, for example, the campaign or in the later stages of a skirmish game, it means it wouldn't work that well. Like, you can, but you know how large groups of StarCraft stuff goes where it's like, oh, I'm trying to move. They'd all get stuck on each other and blasted. So I think they're one of those units that would be slightly worse. Now we have a pair of boys right here that I think are inseparable with the Roach and the Ravager, and they're both going straight into S tier. The Roach on its own is good, obviously, and the Ravager on its own is great, obviously. However, they have to deal with the fact that they're on the same tier as the Hydralisk, because the Hydralisk is hatch tech and costs 75 minerals and 25 gas in StarCraft 1. If you have a cheap, tanky, short-range unit, and the jack of all trades that is the Hydralisk, and your long-range siege unit that can snipe things like siege tanks, what is the layer for? Why do you get a layer? Why would you ever get a hive? The answer is just for 2-2 and 3-3. You wouldn't need to get any sort of tech ever. You could just go for those 3 units, and no matter what you were facing, you would be fine. It'd be crazy, crazy, crazy strong. Maybe you get a Spire for some Scourge in case big flyers come out, but like, no, you just win so fast with your amazing hatch tech army that doesn't even happen. It would be amazing. And one of the things that's really nice about the Ravager is that it is not negatively impacted by casting in the way that other spellcasters are in StarCraft, or from StarCraft 2, because you almost always want to fire a bunch of Biles at the same spot. And that's how StarCraft 1 smart casting works. You know, if you have 12 Ravagers, they'll all fire at the same spot. Maybe you want them split up like 3 over here, 3 over there, 3 over there. But a lot of the time you're just like 12, bunker, gone. And for most of it, if you drop 12 Psystorms on the same thing, you feel like a fool because they don't stack. But for the Ravager, that's a feature, not a bug. So I really like it. I think the Ravager would be amazing. And Ravagers come from the Roach, so they gotta kind of be together. I think the Swarm Host is D tier on the other hand. I think the Swarm Host would be the single worst unit in the game. Because I want you to imagine. You have to go siege a Protoss base, a Terran encampment, a fortress, anything like that. And you get a bunch of Swarm Hosts, you bring them to the front, you burrow them all down, and then suddenly the Locusts pop out. 40, 50 Locusts. And then you have to somehow get them all to attack the enemy through StarCraft 1's pathing. They wouldn't do a gosh darn thing. They wouldn't do a single point of damage anytime. They would all expire. There'd be like one's going over here. There'd be one's going backwards. Some end up in your base somehow. And your opponent just laughs. And they're like, what is happening? This is the dumbest unit I've ever seen. Completely non-viable. Because it's killed by StarCraft 1 pathing, D tier, and the lowest of the low of D tier. The Infestor's like fine. I don't have a lot to say about it. I don't think that it's ever the best use of gas you can have as Zerg. Zerg has a lot of really good gas units. I mean, like they have the Defiler, right? The Infestor has the benefit of being available on an earlier tier than the Defiler. And that is really the reason that you would use it, because everything else that it does is fine, but not exceptional. It would just be, hey, I'm on layer tech and I don't want Mutalisks for some reason. which you do want Mutalisks. They're the best unit in the game. So I do not see myself ever making an Infestor because better options are just available. But if I do have an Infestor, let's say a mission starts you with one or something, they're okay. Fungal Growth is all right. Once again, things are not as stacked, but it does have the ability to nail like flyers and stuff, which could be pretty good. It would make Zerg versus Zerg a complete mess, but you know, always has been. Corruptor is another D tier. I usually don't order things inside of the tiers, but I am going to keep the Swarm Host at the very last. Corruptor is D tier though, because Zerg Anti-Air is insane. It's so good. It is ridiculously good. This is somehow a worse Devourer. I mean, I would rather use the Devourer with some Mutas or some Hydras instead of Corruptors. And of course, I'd rather just use Hydras or rather use Scourge if available. Even Mutas are better anti-air a lot of the time than the Corruptor. It's not a great unit. It never has been. And the only reason that it does exist is because it's paired with the Broodlord, which is another one that has to be in that tier because I don't know what to say about it. The Broodlord would break the game. Like straight up, I don't think any other unit would break the game nearly as hard as the Broodlord would. Simply because it would create this insane, impassable wall of broodlings that are even more frustrating and weird to deal with than they are in StarCraft 2. Like, they already do a really good job at building the impassable wall, but imagine just the game having to process all of that. Imagine trying to stutter step something past that as you clear out the broodlings, because that's often what you like can do in StarCraft 2 is if you have a critical mass of stuff, you can start moving forward and like taking down the broodlings and then getting under the broodlords. It would never happen in this game. It couldn't. I don't know what you would do. It would just completely break everything. So either top of S tier or tier, because I don't know what to say. It is Guardian, but Guardian-er. The only reason the Guardian has an upside is because it morphs from a better unit. You have to make the bad Corruptor in order to make the Broodlord. Viper, I think, is A tier. Oh, it might be S tier. Okay, so hear me out. There's only one thing in the game that is good against Defilers. And that is spells, right? Being able to, like, when you drop a Dark Swarm, being able to drop a Storm on top of it, or being able to drop a Irradiate on the Defiler or stuff like that is really the only way to deal with Dark Swarm. And the Viper with Abduct will always gladly trade one-to-one with one of those units in StarCraft 1 because the Zerg has more gas. They could always throw more gas at the equation, and then if you have Dark Swarm, then your Zerglings just kill all their gas units anyway. So I think that it is like the perfect tandem unit with the Defiler, which is of course one of the best units in the game, one of the best spellcasters in RTS history. And they very well overcome each other's weaknesses. And the Viper comes out faster, because the one negative to the Defiler is that you have to get a Hive and a Defiler Mound and a bunch of upgrades. But you only need a Hive for the Viper. I'm putting it in S tier. Legitimately, I think Abduct. I don't know how you beat Zerg if they have Abduct. I don't know how any defensive fortress exists if Abduct exists. You just pull everything out and you laugh. It'd be so crazy. Welcome to another unit, and that is the Adept. The reason the Adept is an unit is because you cannot wall in StarCraft 1. Like, buildings do not fit together in the way that they do in StarCraft 2. You have to put units in between them in order to make full walls, and the Adept Shade can just pass right through that, which means that any objective in any campaign, you can just scoot to the end and blast it. Any sort of wall in competitive play, you just scoot right past it. It's another one that it breaks the game in half, completely and totally. It's not good, it causes everyone to quit, because the game is fundamentally undesigned for Adept's Shade ability. What is the Sentry? Let me see. I have some notes here, and for the most part, I have not been reading them. I just kind of typed them up so I could remember what I was thinking. Oh, yeah. I don't know. I think this Sentry's probably like B tier. I think that Force Field is really good. However, I don't know. Protoss really has to tech a lot in StarCraft 1 in the beginning. And that's when you want to get the Sentry. I feel like you could do some like cheesy stuff with it, definitely. But one of the things as well is that like the iconic use of Force Field throughout most of StarCraft is like force fielding a ramp so your opponent can't go down it. The problem is that in StarCraft 1, a lot of the times people are just totally cool being on one base for significantly longer or being on two base for significantly longer. So being able to deny that movement and access is not nearly as good. The ability to scout with hallucinate would be really nice. And that's about it. I think it would be a fine unit, but I don't think it would be nearly as game-breaking as it was in like the beginning of Wings of Liberty. Okay. The Immortal. I think the Immortal is a solid A tier. Robotech for Protoss simply does not have a combat unit. So if you gave it a combat unit that didn't require the Robo Bay, that'd be really nice. It'd just be really nice. I mean, you would completely unlock a new worlds here. It would be stunning. It'd be crazy. It'd be awesome. Putting a shuttle with one Immortal and one Reaver in it, so the shuttle drops down the Immortal soaks all the shot, and then the Reaver pops down and starts firing stuff out, would be crazy. You already do that with Zealots. That's how you want to do Reavers in a shuttle, but you do it with an Immortal instead, and ooh, buddy, doesn't matter what version of the game you're playing, you're having a good time, and if they don't have an air unit to chase you away, you're gonna very slowly whittle everything away. So yeah, I think Immortals would be very, very strong, to the point where it would be viable to build multiple Robos, just pumping out a bunch of them. Like, Immortal Dragoon Psystorm just sounds ridiculous in StarCraft 1. Very solid, very solid. For the first Protoss S tier, the Warp Prism, which is hilarious because warp-ins don't exist. The only thing the Warp Prism has going for it is the ability to pick up and drop things, or rather pick things up at a range and then drop them off under it. And yet that would make it better than the shuttle. It goes back to the Reaver thing again. StarCraft 1, there is a lot of Protoss that is solely dedicated to the Reaver. And any time that you make the Reaver better or worse, it completely changes the viability of Protoss as a faction, and this would make the Reaver so good because you no longer have to pick up the Reaver and get out of there. You can start getting out of there and then pick up the Reaver later, which means sometimes they get that extra shot off. Instead of 1, they get 2. Instead of 0, when it becomes dangerous, they get 1 if there's like stuff flying at you. Warp Prism, insane. Insane, and it doesn't have half of its abilities, as I said, which is so funny to me. Colossus, on the other hand, would be like C tier. You know what? I'm just going to put the Disruptor here as well. Actually, I think Disruptor would be even worse. I think it's D tier. Both of these are on the same tech as the Reaver. The Reaver is much cheaper, and it does infinity damage, as opposed to these, which do not infinity damage. This one, it does a lot of damage, but obviously not that often, and things don't clump up as much. And then the Colossus does a decent bit of damage, kinda, but not nearly as much, not as quickly. I would rather have a Reaver 99 times out of 100. Also, you can hit this thing with Scourge. You can chase a shuttle with Scourge, but you just drop the Reavers and it's fine. No. I think that it'd be okay. You might like have Robotech and you might just make a Colossus as part of your army, but you'd never like go for the Colossus instead of the already existing Reaver stuff. And then the Disruptor, I think you'd just never make. It'd be awful. It'd be pointless. The Phoenix is an interesting one, because I think that if you are a decent or even mediocre or even good player, the Phoenix would not be a particularly good unit. And it would be game-breakingly powerful for any exceptional player. because of its ability to kill workers and dominate the skies at the same time. Just like the Reaver dominates the way that Protoss plays a lot of ground stuff, the Mutalisk dominates the way that Zerg plays a lot of air stuff, and the Phoenix just crushes that. The Phoenix can take really any air unit and just run circles around it, comparatively, and that would be game-breaking. Zerg would basically be unable to defend their overlords, because usually, with like Corsairs, the way that you defend your overlords is you have a couple Hydras under it, and maybe a Spore, and because the Corsairs can't hit those, they can't dive all of your overlords. But if you can just pick up the Hydras, then what? Then it's free rate. You need like 700 Spore Crawlers in order to actually fight a Phoenix. That seems kind of unreasonable. So I don't think the Phoenix would be good in the campaign. I don't think the Phoenix would be good for 99% of people, because using StarCraft 1 spellcasters with finesse is really hard, and the unit would require a lot of control on top of that finesse in order to be microed properly. And yet it's still A tier, because the best players in the world would run circles around everybody on the planet with this thing. The Oracle, I think, is also A tier. Stasis Ward is very annoying and quite good to just stun things. Once again, it wouldn't stun as many things as often because of pathing, but it still is a really nice roadblock a lot of the time. The Pulsar Beam to do harassment is pretty decent. I think it would be solid. And then the big benefit is that it provides detection. And as we talked about before, the Observer is Protoss's only piece of detection in StarCraft 1. So being able to double that up onto Starport tech as well would be the biggest relief in the history of mankind. You'd never have to build an observatory again. And that is like every Protoss's eyes just lit up as soon as I said that. No observatory. Yes, please sign me up. Yeah, it'd be really, really nice and convenient. I don't think it would be it would be like the top of A tier. If I was doing levels, it would be the top of A tier, very close to S tier, but not quite there. Still very good. The Void Ray, I think, would be like B tier. It'd be one of those units that if you get like a bunch of them, they'd be really good. But the Void Ray has always struggled with the fact that you can kill it with a bunch of units, and stuff like Hydralisks just smash, and they would smash even harder Void Rays. Goliaths would be really good against them. Super, super, super good against them. And I guess Protoss versus Protoss would really suck. You'd be able to melt through any Protoss, but there's tons of Goliaths everywhere, there's tons of Hydras everywhere, and Void Rays are really expensive, and they have to take time to charge up. So I'm not... Well, I guess you hit the button now, don't you? Either way, I think they'd be worse than you think. However, they would be a good death ball unit. If you can get like 2 control groups of Void Rays, they would steamroll stuff. It's just, you might as well get carriers at some point. The Tempest, I think, would be fine. No, it's probably an unit, huh? Because it fires so freaking far away that once again, StarCraft 1 maps are just not designed for it, and it would be completely uncontestable and really annoying. And then the entire game would have to be rewritten from the ground up, and then it would probably be fine. It'd be good at some things, it'd be really bad at other things. It's very expensive, and you'd probably just get rolled over if you try to go for them. But if you manage to get a bunch out and start like picking your opponent's defenses apart, then they could be pretty good. However, stuff like Dark Swarm exists once again, and you know, like Zerg in StarCraft 2, you're hitting away at their spores and stuff with your Tempest in order to destroy them, but you just have infinite number of Dark Swarms that you just sit under with your army, and the Tempest instantly does nothing. So I don't think it'd be as good as it is in StarCraft 2, but it would still probably be decent once mineral lines are like fixed once again. I'm going to put it next to the Liberator, not because they're equal in power, but because they're the same issue. And then finally we have the Mothership. Why would you build the Mothership? Wow, it has a cloaking field. So does the Arbiter. Wow, it can recall units to it. So can the Arbiter. Wow, it can slow units with time warp? Yeah, but we got stasis. And the Arbiter's cheaper. And I'm pretty sure that like durability per dollar, the Arbiter is more durable. And I'm pretty sure that the Arbiter is more handsome, and he got better grades. And I don't know what else, but I didn't really think about this before, but the mothership's trash, isn't it, in this game? It would be useless. You just have Arbiters. Arbiters are faster. I think they're more durable. They do everything better. If you have multiple, you're getting more energy regeneration. The mothership might use cooldowns now. I don't even remember. Yeah, the only thing the mothership does is have a really cool triple attack now. But that's it. It doesn't even do good damage. Mothership, I think, is D tier. I'm gonna put it in C because it is strong. It's just like, why would you ever not build Arbiters instead? If you really need that auto attack, then maybe, because the Arbiter auto attack sucks, but everything else about the mothership is just bad. That's really depressing. Oh well. Yeah, so this is my tier list. It's not my normal standard distribution that I go for, but that is because it is a very weird premise for a tier list, and as a result, you end up with a lot of completely unexpected things. Overall, I don't think this is bad necessarily. I think this is probably pretty accurate to the way that they would all ruin the game. Yeah, I think that's about it. They would all of these guys would ruin the game in pretty obvious ways. These guys would ruin the game in less obvious ways. These guys would probably be moderately healthy for the game. These wouldn't see much play, and these would be, you'd be laughed at if you tried, and these would probably, like, cause a diplomatic incident with South Korea. Yeah, I think that's where we're at with this tier list. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have your thoughts, I would love to hear them in the comments. Respectfully. I know some people get very mad about tier lists for some reason, but we're just having fun here and we're just talking about things, and I know that you're all big boys and girls and can be very respectful and cordial. I will see you guys tomorrow. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace.